Right, so this video is going to be a little bit different. I bought some art supplies and there's some stuff I've been making, and there's just things I want to talk about that I don't want to end up talking about in other videos and kind of clogging them up with that. So I'm just gonna join them all in one video, and if anything has a tutorial or something, I'll link to it from here to kind of expand on it. Otherwise, if you want to skip to a certain part or a certain supplier or something, I'll put a little table of contents with annotation, and you can skip around the video to wherever you're interested in. So, first of all, I researched a bit more about painting thickly with watercolors, and what I found out is that some manufacturers put in a little bit of honey to keep the paint in the pans from drying, and I tried that out, but you need quite a lot of honey if the painting is going to be in like the summer, like a summer heat or something. It still cracks. It cracks less, but it still cracks, and honey doesn't ever dry up, and with watercolors, a drop or two isn't going to do anything, especially because you thin them down usually. But if they're going to be thick, I worried about the stability of the paint film. I thought about maybe trying with some glycerin, but I didn't have I ran out, and I was going to buy some propylene glycol to serve as a retarder for the acrylic paints. I never tried that before, and I was thinking maybe to test that with the watercolors as well, but they were out of stock, so I couldn't buy it yet. And I'm afraid any glycerin or propylene glycol would thin down the watercolors too much and wouldn't even make them usable as thick paints. So in the end, I kind of discarded that. It's too fragile a medium, I think. I did look up any gouache, if there were any good gouache brands, but this brand, which is the only brand sometimes to carry professional grade paints, and it's a national brand. They had gouache, but they had all fugitive colors, so they were not light fast at all. So I'm not even gonna try, because even if they do paint, even if they can hold a thicker layer, I'm not gonna buy any of the colors they have, because they were all fugitive. So that discarded watercolors and gouache. And then I sold off some stuff to buy these supplies, and I was going to invest the money in the oil paints. I did find a place where they appeared to have lavender spike oil, and with the new money I was willing to order it online and try it, but it's since disappeared. And when stuff keeps going in and out of stock like that, sometimes it disappears completely, and for something that would be so important to painting with oils, I can't afford to have that go in and out of stock and be hard to find. So that's unfortunately, I've had to discard oils, even though they do have a nicer color range. The acrylics are slightly limited, but I ended up having to go with acrylics. So these are the acrylics, and I also went with them because I have been working on a better stay wet palette. So I'll make a tutorial about this and how to make it exactly, but I made a better stay wet palette, which shouldn't require any spraying at all. And then I also made a bunch of these bottle cap containers, and there's already a tutorial for this. I'll put a link to it in the description, but I'm going to update it because I've used a different plastic, and it should make a better seal, but I'll update it when I'm sure that it has worked. I've already filled one of them up here, and I ended up doing this like color coding. I'm gonna fill these with all my main colors, and then paint the caps like this so I can tell which are which. But yeah, now I have enough of these containers, there's like 20 or something, where I don't have to worry about having space to store a color, because that was kind of a problem before with the red. I didn't have enough of those containers to keep a red mix ready, so that was a problem. But now it's not, and I also, I kept thinking about ways to prevent the acrylics from drying, and I thought of getting a silicone sheet, or making a silicone sheet or something, because what happens on the glass is that when you drag around the color, so let me get rid of this and show you. So when you have a color here and you start to mix it with another one, you start to get these stripes of paint, especially if you want to move this. If you want to move this, you can't move it, because it's very hard to clean all that up. And once that dries, when you try to mix on top of that, you pick up those wet pieces and they start to get mixed into the paint, and I really hate that. Glass is nice because it's easy to clean up, but it's not very nice with acrylics because of this reason. So I started to think of ways I could improve that, and I realized that if I use silicone instead, that would probably make a great working surface. So I tried it out on a like one of those baking molds on a little flat piece, and it worked really well. So I invested in a larger sheet. This was like a baking tray or something, and the inside is kind of glossy and likes to get a lot of dust stuck to it, and it looks like it has some scratches, so it can scratch. So I'm not using that side. It could be used, it still works, but I found this side is better. And so let me put more paint there so you can see what I mean. So here's the paint, and when you mix it around, you can see it's much easier to drag. I could drag this to a whole different place and get all those stripes of paint. And since the paint isn't in thin areas, like you can pile it up like this, it'll take longer to dry, so you can have small piles like this for a little while. And then what I plan to do is, if I make small mixes, I'll leave them here, but if I'll mix the colors here, and I can grab them all like that and put them on the stay wet palette when I'm done with the mix, and there it can stay without having to be sprayed for quite a while. And once this paint dries, so here I've already have from a previous attempt of the video, I have some dry paint, and this doesn't pick up the paint underneath, so it kind of gets stuck there, kind of like a smudge. So you get less paint particles, less dry paint particles mixing in with the paint and being annoying. So that's another great thing that was kind of a side effect. It does get stuck a bit like that now. It does start to get dirty, but it's much better, I think, than glass. And it's a bit harder to wash, to clean than glass, because with glass you can just scrape it all off. Here you can't scrape it, but it is easier to clean than, say, like a plastic palette. What I do is, first of all, I take off as much wet paint as there is, and I put it in a container that just has all the mud left over, and then I put a few drops of alcohol, and I grab a toothbrush and some soap and kind of scrub it all in, and then I get a paper towel and take all that off, because I'm starting to use some toxic pigments now, so I don't want to wash those down the drain if possible. So I clean that up as much as usual, and then I rinse it, and it's good as new. So we're gonna put this away. So because of all that, I chose the acrylics, and I bought a burnt umber, a yellow ochre, I was kind of torn whether to buy burnt sienna or Indian red, because I looked at them and I really liked that Indian red. So instead of buying a big tube of burnt sienna, I bought two little ones like this to see which one I liked best, or maybe I like both and end up using them both. And whatever I decide, I'll buy bigger tubes later. And then I also bought a cadmium red and quinacridone red. So basically, the burnt umber, I'm kind of disappointed in the burnt umber. It's a bit more opaque and lighter than I expected. It's still going to work, but it doesn't mix a nice black with phthalo blue like I would expect. It mixes to sort of green, which isn't bad, but that just means I'll have to mix black some other way or have black ready and available, which I do, and I have the carbon black from Golden has a very high tinting strength, so that'll last for quite a while. But yeah, that just means I can't mix a good black with that. The yellow ochre looks great. I really like it. And I tried all these out on a color wheel with a bunch of different mixes and with other paints that I have. So I'll put those up whenever I talk about mixes. So I already mentioned the burnt sienna and the Indian red. The Indian red actually was a lot lighter and orange than it looked online. I ended up putting a little paint stroke on that watercolor painting, and as you can see, it was as bright as the brilliant red in the cheap watercolor set, so that's great. That means less need for a bright red. And then I bought a cadmium red, but I was kind of disappointed with the cadmium red. It's very muddy. I don't know, not muddy, but it doesn't mix very nice pinks, and it's impossible to mix any sort of purple. I was expecting maybe a hint of purple with a blue leaning blue, but I mean a red leaning blue, but nothing. It just mixes to mud, so that was kind of disappointing. And I also got the quinacridone red, which was the closest available to the quinacridone magenta that I have. So this was the closest match, and it is quite a lot redder than the golden quinacridone magenta, so that's kind of nice. And that it might, I could use it as a red maybe instead of the cadmium, and it also mixes very nice purples. So, and it's also, for this brand in particular, the cadmium red, the series go from 1 to 4, and the cadmium red is a 4, and the quinacridone magenta is a 3, and I will have to buy a cadmium yellow, because I was looking at the pigments available for this brand, and these are the only two pigments that were rated the best light fastness, and they use their own scale, so I don't really trust any of the other ones that have 2 stars instead of 1. So these have 1 star, which meant the highest light fast rating. And with the yellows, the only yellow that has a good light fast rating is the cadmium yellow. So I'm kind of stuck with that, and for this brand it's a series 3. And I could mix, if this needs to be, to have some yellow added, you only need a little bit of yellow to make it red. So I'm thinking I might end up not buying cadmium again, and just using this quinacridone red and kind of splitting it. So I use like 2/3 of the tube and like 1/5 of the yellow to make some red, and the other I'll just leave for when I need those really nice purples. So I'll do something like that. And so that's all the colors. And then real quick, I just wanted to go over kind of how to read a paint tube. I wanted to cover that. So this is my a golden tube, and I really like these because they have a lot of information. And whereas, for example, with this national brand here, it does have the series, of course, the name and the name in English. So that's helpful, so I don't have to be translating it in my head all the time. It does tell me the pigment and the pigment number, and it does give me the light fast rating, but again, it's the company's own scale. So if I were to buy something that didn't have a good light fast rating, like it had 2 stars instead of 1, I'd have to test that myself first because I don't really trust them. It doesn't say, these don't say, for example, the tinting strength on here. You can only find it online. It doesn't say the opacity. It doesn't have a color swatch, and it's not printed on the tube, so this starts to come apart eventually, and you just end up with a metallic tube, because you can see it here on the burnt umber. It's already starting to peel off here. It's very annoying. In comparison, golden has it uses an ASTM scale of light fastness, which is like more universal. And that little number there at the end, that little 1, is the light fast rating. And they don't give you a measure of opacity, but they do give you this really nice paint swatch, which basically tells you that even better than any rating would. I really love that paint swatch. And then on the back, they give you the tinting strength. So almost all the info is on this tube. And they have even more info online, but there's the pigment as well. They don't give you a pigment name, they give you a number, but usually you want to kind of shop by number once you know what you're doing. So I prefer that. Just one last thing that's important is that pay attention to how much the paint brings, and usually I do it by cost per milliliter. So you divide however much the paint tube costs by the milliliters, and that way you'll know, you can compare between different brands, because sometimes, for example, here this one's 59 and this one's 60, and with these small ones sometimes you get anywhere between 18 and 20 something milliliters, so you can compare the cost exactly if you do that calculation. And yeah, oh, and one last thing, the series, that depends on the company. So this pigment, for example, for golden, is a series 4, and golden goes from 1 through 7, I think. But for this national brand here, it's a series 1 pigment. So not all pigments are the same series in different brands, except like if you want to tell which is the cheapest, you can always go to yellow ochre or one of the earth colors, and the most expensive is likely to be a cadmium red. But that's just a general thing to orient yourself in case they use something weird like letters. So yeah, so that's mostly all you need to know about paint tubes. And my final palette is likely to be something like this, by the way. So with that Phthalo blue, and pretend this is a cadmium yellow, and I might need a black in there, and of course titanium white. They didn't have any, but I plan to buy like a giant tub of this because this is what you use up the most. Unfortunately, they don't have zinc white. I was kind of surprised. Only the oil colors have a zinc white. So I might just make 2 versions of white, one that's really thin and one that's just pure titanium white. So yeah, there we go. That's all the paints. And sticking with the subject of paints, I bought a better painting palette knife. This is the smallest I could find last time, and as you can see, it's not very flexible. And I have this problem where the paint, like when you try to wipe off the paint, it keeps riding up higher and higher instead of actually getting cleaned until you get paint that like past that edge right there. So once you get it past there, it's almost impossible to clean, and it's really annoying. It wastes a lot of paint. So when I saw this one, I instantly got it. It's much more flexible, so that means you can use more of just the tip to spread the paint around. I'll make a quick comparison here. So here's our paint, and I'm just gonna mix that, get the palette knife dirty, and as you can see, it doesn't go past there, and then you can wipe it like this, and you can get most of the paint off, and then just get it with the tip. This works better on the silicone, of course, and see, you can decrease that, so you can control it. Whereas with this one, if I try to do that, so I'm mixing my paint, it easily gets past that corner right there, and once that happens, if I try to drag this, it just goes higher and higher, and you can't clean it off, and you have to wipe that off with a paper towel or something. So that's really annoying, and I really like this new palette knife better. The only problem is that they made it round for some reason, and if you put this down, it tends to roll about into the paint, whereas this one, it has it's kind of blocky here, so when you lay it down, it lays down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sand the top and the bottom, and hopefully that'll make it stay in place, because the moment you touch it, sometimes it'll roll about. And then I bought some paint brushes. I talked about in a previous video how I'd kind of bought these in a hurry, and they were really cheap. This one lost a few hairs and then it kind of stopped. And these are all synthetic, but usually the cheap synthetics, I mean, they work fine, and they tend not to lose hair compared to cheap natural hair brushes. But they're very soft, so you have to go to the more expensive brands to get a stiffer paintbrush. So for example, this brand over here, this is much stiffer, but it's also like twice as expensive. So I was looking around a bit, and I was about to maybe buy some hog hair brushes, which are very stiff, and they didn't look like they'd lose a lot of hair, even though they were cheap. But then I saw these brushes, and these kind of remind me of the brushes, like the little brush that comes with nail paint, like those thick nylon fibers. And they're very stiff. They don't thin down or anything near the point, and they're about the width of a hair instead of being thick, but they're like that stiffness, and they make that sort of sound. And these were really cheap, and I imagine because there's really not much of a science to it compared to, say, these, which are shaped, and they thin down towards the end. But I really like these. They're very stiff. They're going to be really nice for pushing paint about, and they were very cheap. The only thing is they didn't have anything smaller than this small one right here, so I did end up having to buy this one from this same brand, and this, I would classify it as kind of a medium stiffness. And I wanted a really small one like this because, and it's actually smaller than this one. Yeah, it's smaller than this one. This one's filled with paint, by the way, that's why it's stiff. But I wanted one like this because I have a round brush, but it tends to to fray a lot, like the bristles get out of shape real quick. And I think this one being shaped more like a flat would still let me do thin lines, but at the same time keep its shape more, so that's why I bought that one. And then going away from paint related supplies, I bought this Woodless Pencil. I was thinking about just buying a pack of these. I try to draw in pen to do practice drawings in pen so that they show up on the video, but sometimes I need a pencil, and I ended up using this 9B a lot because it's the darkest. And I was thinking about it, and I could probably just stick with a 9B and for quite a long time. Like, I use it up quite a lot more because it's a softer pencil and because I like it. So I eat these up compared to the other harnesses. So I was thinking about buying a pack of these, but the problem with these is that they shade. Like, if you try to shade, you don't get a lot of area, and when I'm doing bigger drawings, that's a bit of a problem sometimes, the shading. So I had this graphite stick, and I don't really like using this square as it is. So to test whether I'd like a woodless pencil, I sharpened this, and this worked a lot nicer. But when you sharpen it, you waste a lot of the graphite. So I looked up the woodless pencils, and they were a bit expensive, at least the Lyra brand. But I was planning on getting it anyways, and then I went to a different store and I saw this Cretacolor, and it's really smooth, and I really like it, and you can shade nice large areas. So I got this one instead, and it was about half the price. And the tip already broke off, but you can still make thin lines, even with this one, which I've used for quite a while. It tends to keep a tip somewhere, so when you need to make that dark line, you can do it anyways, and you don't have to be sharpening it all the time. The only problem with this one is that the coating to prevent your fingers from getting graphite, at first it would only shade like this because it was like raising the pencil up, so I carved away at it a bit and took off the coating around the edge right there, and once I did that, I could shade larger areas like this. So I'm really happy with this one, and it was a lot cheaper than the other brand. So yeah, I'll probably be using more of this one for future studies. And then finally, I bought this Faber Castell Pitt artist pen, but the thinner one. I already had this one. This was my first one, and I really liked it. But to get like gray tones, I would have to thin it down, and I was afraid of kind of ruining like the actual darkness if I put too much water in there. So I finally got a gray, which kind of goes in and out of stock, and it's hard to get. But I'm not really, I mean, it's an okay gray, but it's a lot grainier than I thought. So this is the gray, and as you can see, it has a bit of a grain, and this kind of depends on the paper, but I much prefer using this black one and thinning it down. So if you get some water, and like just in a drop of water, you thin it down, you can get a really nice graduation like that, and it's not nearly as grainy. So usually this is the one I would use to line, but it's also quite thick, so I thought, why don't I buy this one? So I'll have this one for lining and for filling in small dark areas, and then I don't have to fear ruining this one with water, and when it starts to dry out, I'll just refill it with water or watered down ink, and I'll have this nicer gray compared to this one, and I don't have to keep trying to find this one, which keeps going in and out of stock. These two are much easier to find. Even just two of these would work, so that's why I bought this one. And then lastly, this isn't something I bought, but I ran out of ink on the pen I use for the studies, for the practice drawings. So I went to look for a replacement, just took it out of another pen, and I was fooling around a bit, and I kind of accidentally made this, and I really like it. Basically, this was like a big pen, and I got a replacement that doesn't have like that big tip, and I put a spring in there, and there were a few other modifications. I'll make a short tutorial on how to make it if you're interested. And basically now it's kind of like a spring-loaded pen, so it's really nice for getting getting really thin layers. So for example, I have this drawing here. So this was before with just or the regular pen, and as you can see, it's kind of hard to tell, and it's hard to keep the lines light. And this does vary from pen to pen. You could try to find a pen that has very light lines for quite a while, but this is kind of a different solution. And this these are some of the drawings afterwards with this new one, and of course part of it has to do with the different refill, but a part of it has to do with the spring, and it feels really nice because you can feel at what level you're drawing with. It's like kind of exaggerated, so you can go between like really hard, and you can see that you're pressing down a lot, and really soft where you're just lightly laying it there, and the spring is offering some cushioning. So I like it because you can see it on the camera, and it also works a bit more like pencil, so I can afford to use pen in some places where otherwise I would have gone to pencil before. So yeah, so that's the last thing. If you have any questions, leave a comment. Otherwise, please consider subscribing or following me on any of my social media sites. And if you want to help support me, help me be able to afford more art supplies, review those, experiment with more things, I have a Patreon.